In Wave 2 or Wave 3 of NFL free agency, could the Denver Broncos take a look at a former CU Buffs wide receiver, a Colorado college product? We'll take a look at that and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, Broncos Country, for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, you can get this show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Do us a favor, subscribe or follow down below so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team all throughout the entire offseason. It's a big week for the Broncos this week as the NFL Scouting Combine will be ongoing. We get to hear from George Payton and Sean Payton this week. There's so much to break down, but Broncos Country, we're going to continue our free agency preview here on today's episode of the show. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, PromelyOrange.com. Looking at wide receiver. Sayre, this is always an interesting conversation because Denver's wide receiver room right now has some question marks about what Denver's going to do. They could look maybe in free agency in Wave 2 or Wave 3 at a potential Colorado reunion of sorts. A certain guy that played his college ball at Folsom Field in Boulder. Could Laviska Shenault maybe be an option for the Broncos? And would that be a move that inspires confidence, in your opinion?
Hey, maybe some good vibes for Laviska in the state of Colorado, right? Obviously, that was really the last time that we saw him playing at a great level was when he was at Colorado, potential first rounder. I know he dropped into round 2 where he was selected by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think kind of got a raw deal coming into the NFL, didn't he, Cody? I mean, early on in his career, you had the whole Urban Meyer fiasco. I believe that was 2021 or 2. I can't remember exactly when. It feels like it's been forever. 2021, I believe, is when. So it would have been Laviska's second season in the NFL. And in those formative years, you're not only changing coaching staffs, but then all of a sudden you get maybe the worst head coach in NFL history coming in. And then you change coaching staffs again, you get traded, so, and then also that coach that he was just with, Frank Reich, by the way, fired before the end of his first season. So not exactly the most stable of situations for Laviska in his first 4 NFL seasons. I think every Broncos fan who has even followed him remotely closely, even if you're not a CU Buffs fan, you see the talent that he had when he was in college. And you believe that that guy is still in there somewhere. If he can stay healthy for any stretch of time, if he can get into a stable situation. I know that folks really don't view the Broncos in that light right now, but I'm telling you what, there weren't many position groups on that roster last year that were worse than the year before. The whole team was better. I mean, Sean Payton and his coaching staff, I know that the Broncos get a lot of flack right now, Cody, from fans for not having the best roster, not having a lot of draft picks, not having a ton of salary cap space and this, that, and the other. This coaching staff can maximize talent. And I think Laviska Shenault could find that he could thrive in Denver.
Well, I think a change of environment can help. And look, you make some great points about his first 4 years in the NFL, some ups and downs. I will say maybe some glance of maybe what you can do with Laviska, what Sean Payton could do. We saw Sean do a little bit of this with Jerry Jeudy this past year. There were times where we saw Laviska in the backfield with Bryce Young, lined up at the running back position or lined up, in the pistol. You can do certain things with a guy of his skill set. I would say probably the biggest knock and critique here on Laviska is that he has been a guy throughout his 4 years in the NFL, has been banged up. Injuries have been a concern for him. I know that was some of the concern even coming out of college were the injury factors there. And when you're a talented player and you got fast twitch muscle fibers the way that a guy like Laviska does, you are prone to some soft tissue injuries, some lower body injury. I know he had an ankle injury last year in Carolina. So that would be some hesitancy. But also, Sayre, we are talking here about not like a big splash free agent at the wide receiver position. We're talking about Wave 2, Wave 3 guys. And you have better leverage bringing a guy into a situation where he's got a chip on his shoulder. He has a lot to prove, which means the market for him probably won't be so strong, which gives, I think, the Broncos a chance if they do make some changes to the wide receiver room, which there are some to be anticipated. I know Mike Kliss put out an article over the weekend about Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton. I'll let you share the tidbits of that here, but you could bring in a guy like Laviska, and it's not going to cost you really anything to do that.
Yeah, really a financially responsible move like we've been talking about all offseason. The Broncos may not go after those tier one guys, and I think we assume that they won't at this point. But like you said, Laviska could be one of those guys in wave 2, wave 3. I mean, the price to acquire him is not going to be substantial. It's going to be minimal risk, low risk, potentially high reward. And I think, like you mentioned with Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Mike Kliss of 9 News, the insider over there, he said they expect Cortland Sutton to be back this year for the Broncos. He's 2 years left on his deal. A lot of trade rumors. I don't think he's going anywhere. They want Tim Patrick back as well, according to Mike Kliss. The Broncos want to bring him back at a reduced salary. We know that Tim got his guaranteed money in his first 2 years. He's kind of moved around some of that money in order to free up some cap space while he's been hurt the last 2 years, but he still got that money that was fully guaranteed at the time of his signing. So you kind of feel like he'll be amenable to coming back. Now you potentially throw somebody like Laviska Shenault into the mix, where we have a coaching staff that, like I said, not only have they developed guys well, but they've utilized players with versatile skill sets better than most, I would say. When you look throughout their history, of course, I think Taysom Hill is probably the most obvious example, isn't he, of somebody who came into the NFL borderline positionless, a quarterback who can't play the quarterback position at a high enough level to sustain in the NFL. So what do? You find other creative ways to get him the ball and let him do what he does best. I think there's a number of examples of that throughout Sean Payton's history that we could point to. Somebody like Reggie Bush, who was not great outside of New Orleans, right? And not even because of injuries. They just knew how to use him there. So I think that it's something that I would really highly consider, Cody, is bringing a guy like this in with versatility. You can get him the ball out of the backfield. You want players that can create offense after the catch and make plays in space. The Broncos don't have enough of those guys. Laviska Shenault, that's his bread and butter, is getting the ball out in space, making guys miss, breaking tackles, and creating where the Broncos desperately need it, just creating offense.
They need a little bit more from that from wide receiver. I mean, we can make the argument they need that from a tight end position as well. Portland is great, right? But you need more production out of that unit, and it can't just be 3 running backs as, behind Cortland and Jerry as your next 2 target leaders in the passing game. That's not a great system, and I'm very curious to see if Sean Payton really changes that up going into next season. I wonder if we'll see a heavy emphasis on wide receivers and tight ends really leading in targets. Just still blows my mind that all these different running backs had, a really good, reputable volume of overall targets in the passing game. Obviously, not good enough for Denver to sustain where they want to be going forward. But Broncos country, we want to ask you, what would your thoughts be if Laviska Shenault was potentially in play in free agency to come to the Denver Broncos? Would you like that type of signing in wave 2 or wave 3, or would you hate it? Make sure you let us know here. One thing you are going to take a look at is another wide receiver, probably a guy who's got a little bit more of a prominent name to him in this year's NFL free agency cycle. Could the Denver Broncos go Hollywood? We'll look at Hollywood Brown from the Arizona Cardinals coming up here on today's episode, Locked on Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook today. Because right now, new customers, they get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. You go on and you sign up as a brand new customer here today at FanDuel Sportsbook. You place a bet, you put $5 on the line there, and when your bet wins, you will get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams, and even get a triple-double if you do a 3-game parlay on some of the biggest games around the association on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. You can also do quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
Could the Denver Broncos have something in the works at wide receiver in free agency? Specifically, could they go after former first-round pick Hollywood Brown, who's been recently playing for the Arizona Cardinals? And I think we got to discuss, does this have an impact on Marvin Mims, Jerry Jeudy? I think that's a realistic option the Broncos could look at, but Cody and I, we're going to break down maybe why or why not some Hollywood Brown in Denver in free agency on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Let us know what you think. Every single one of you, every dayers out there, we appreciate you so much for making us part of your day, however you choose to do so. If you listen to the podcast, free and available anywhere that you get your podcasts, or if you watch the show on YouTube, let us know your thoughts on some free agent wide receivers. We love getting to know what you think. And Cody, I think this will be an interesting topic here. Hollywood Brown, he's probably right on the cusp of what we've been discussing, this tier 1 versus tier 2 free agents. I don't personally view Marquise Brown as a tier 1 free agent, right? I think that he's tier 2 at best, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, he still could cost a pretty penny when it comes to the overall dollar amount that he'll get from some team. Do you view him as a realistic option for the Broncos? And maybe what do you think could be the fallout of signing a guy like this?
I think he'd be a fun addition to the Broncos, right? And look, I'll always remember Hollywood Brown. Remember, it was when Vic Fangio was still the head coach for the Broncos, and the game plan was, hey, we want to contain Lamar Jackson, force him to beat us in the air with his arm. And what did he do? He went downtown to Hollywood Brown several times, and just where the Broncos got abused and gashed up. I was surprised when they traded him, to be honest with you. I was like, wow, you're getting rid of a weapon for a guy like Lamar Jackson, who needs a guy like that. And obviously now Baltimore's sitting in a pretty good position because they got some really dang good wide receivers surrounding him. But Hollywood's a guy that, look, even in Arizona, I think he dealt with some injuries. We thought when they had him and DeAndre Hopkins there together with the Cardinals, like, hey, that's an unbelievably talented room. Then you factor in Rondale Moore being another option that they have there. It didn't work out on paper the way I think a lot of people had hoped for. And obviously, look, Kyler had his ACL injury. They went through some of their own changes. They've gone through a wide variety of different outlooks here. Hollywood Brown, though, is a guy that I think is looking to rebuild his image a little bit. And I don't think some of the production stuff or the lack of production is necessarily his fault for what's happened in Arizona. To me, I think that Denver would be an environment that, hey, you plug him in. Let's say Cortland is back. Let's say Tim is back. And Marvin Mims, you have him obviously going to year 2. You need to see an expanded role for him. Hollywood Brown, Marquise could be a guy that maybe is a reliable outlet option for you on third down, right? Because if you have Tim out there healthy, Cortland out there healthy, Marvin's speed threat, you have 2 guys with speed with Hollywood Brown and Marvin that you could do so many different things with. So for me, I think it would make the Broncos offense better. He'd be a little bit more of a luxury pick. And to be honest with you, out of all the guys that we're talking about here today, even including Laviska Shenault, Hollywood Brown is the type of guy that I think would be a perfect fit with Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos.
And quite honestly, he'd be a perfect fit if Russell Wilson comes back. I know we don't talk about that very often because doesn't feel like it's very realistic at this point, but he would suit Russell Wilson's skill set exceptionally well. And the Broncos just purely speaking don't have enough talent offensively for any of us to sit here and say like, well, I don't know, is that too much? Is that too much at wide receiver? Is that too much invested offense? The Broncos have stunk so bad offensively, Cody, that they need to do whatever it takes, in my opinion. I mean, you said the word luxury, and I agree with you. On paper, this would look like a total luxury move, but at the same time, it's like, when are we going to start killing this need offensively with fire? I mean, Hollywood Brown is a guy who's been productive in the past at a high volume targets, had a career high 8 touchdown catches a few years ago in Baltimore, right before 2 years before he was traded. Had 7 touchdowns his rookie year, 8 his second year, 6 his third season. The production hasn't been exactly there with Arizona, but like you mentioned, Kyler Murray tears his ACL last year. So it's not been every one of these guys that hits free agency. There's a story to be told, isn't there? With Laviska Shenault, there's injuries and, X, Y, and Z coaching issues over his first handful of years. With Hollywood Brown, he gets traded after year 3, goes to an environment in Arizona where things are supposed to be great, and they kind of were for a year. And then, the next year you lose Kyler Murray. And so I just think there's so much more to the story with these guys that if you could get somebody like Hollywood Brown in Denver at $8 million a year, let's say for 2 seasons, something like that. I mean, that's a deal that I would make. And I don't care necessarily at this point in time. The question that I think needs to be asked, does he make Marvin Mims redundant? And I think that that's something that's like, how do we get to the point of being in that position to be able to say anyone in this offense is redundant? I don't think you can have too many playmakers.
No, and Denver certainly could have benefited from having more playmakers last season. I mean, it's to the point that when Lucas Kroll's first catch at 35 yards puts him in a category as the second leading tight end in terms of yardage, and not by much. Like, he really closed the gap between he and Adam Troutman with just 1 catch. And that was that Chargers game at SoFi Stadium. Like, what are we doing here? That has to revamp the offense a little bit. And look, I think the thing about Hollywood Brown that you can really do with him, Sean Payton can find ways to be creative. We've seen Cortland move to the slot, right? As the number 2 guy, sometimes as the number 3 guy. You can put Hollywood on the outside. You can put him in the slot. You can bring him in motion, bring him back across. We've seen a lot of motion from Sean Payton's offense. And I feel like he'd be more so the guy to do it in the offense, more so than Jerry Jeudy, right? We've seen Jerry do that, but I think Jerry's more dangerous. And if he's back this year, Jerry's dangerous lining up in the slot and being able to just run his routes versus being the motion guy. Marvin, I think, can do so much more than just being the motion guy. You have all these other pieces around Hollywood. He's going to find success. And I think it's all about creation, right? Can you create an environment? Can you create a system that plays to everybody's strengths? I think you had guys doing things last year in Peyton's offense that they weren't necessarily, it wasn't their strength in a lot of different situations, but they had nobody else. So they had to figure out like, hey, you have to learn this rule. You have to embrace it, which the guys did. But I think you can make it a lot easier, and having more is a great option to have. And look, I know for the last few years, you've been on this show specifically. You've been banging the drum for Denver just to add more wide receivers because there are strength in numbers. You have 1 or 2 injuries happen, which that has been the case for the Broncos. They've had a major wide receiver go down with an injury every single year since 2020. This is where maybe you can kind of buck that trend a little bit and add guys that bring value to your offense that can give you a chance to win. And I certainly think a guy like Marquise Hollywood Brown would be a fantastic addition here for Sean Payton's offense.
100%. And I think that his ability after the catch, his ability to run vertical routes and make plays downfield, like there's so much to like about this option. It would be super cool to have 2 former Oklahoma guys out there terrorizing defenses with, I mean, not the same exact skill set, but pretty similar. But like you said, you can't necessarily always designate one guy as the motion guy. You can't go out every single week and expect the same top 3 guys. Like, this isn't the NBA, you know, where you're starting 5, you're leaning on these. You have to rely on a lot of different guys over the course of a season. I think the Broncos need to assemble the best possible group of receivers that they can. I know that seems to be like well, that's an obvious statement, but man, if they haven't done it the last handful of years, we just haven't seen them build the right kind of depth. And now you have a chance if you can get Tim Patrick back on a smaller deal, a smaller short-term deal. You have Marvin Mims on his rookie contract. I mean, depending on what happens with Jerry Jeudy, you can afford, there's some flexibility here at receiver, tight end, running back, things like that. You need to make the offense better any way possible. I love the idea of just adding as much talent as you can within the realm of reason, I guess, in terms of financially speaking.
The Broncos Country, we want to know how you feel. Would you welcome Hollywood Brown to Denver? Could Denver go Hollywood in 2024? Let us know down below here. But one thing we are going to talk about, another option here, a lot of interest from Broncos Country and the Chicago Bears. A lot of Broncos fans want Denver to trade with Chicago for a quarterback. But what if we were to tell you that maybe the Broncos could get somebody from Chicago that can maybe take things to the moon here in 2024? We'll talk about Darnell Mooney being a potential wave 2, wave 3 free agent option here for Sean Payton and the Broncos here in today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? And the best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. And to be honest with you, I've benefited over the past of doing therapy. I do it once a month. I always think it's great to check in. I've seen benefits because I don't have the answer to everything. And I deal with a lot of stress. I deal with a lot of anxiety. And I'm not afraid to talk about that stuff because it's important. It's important to be vulnerable in that situation. And therapy has helped me find ways to reduce that and to also better understand myself in some of these moments here. And I've used BetterHelp in the past. I signed up. I was able to connect with a therapist really, really quickly. My therapist and I, we vibe really well. But if you don't vibe with your therapist when you connect and you sign up at BetterHelp here today, you can change therapists at any time at no additional cost to yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and best of all, suited to your schedule and your needs. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and then switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. If the Broncos look to make a free agency move in wave 2 or wave 3 of the free agency period at wide receiver, could Darnell Mooney be a surprise fit here for the Broncos to maybe find a little bit of resurgence going forth in his career. Just want to say thank you so much once again, Broncos Country, for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Just a reminder, we're here for you every single day, all year long, because for the true fan, there's never an off season. Continuing our conversation here today, Darnell Mooney. I mean, I kind of teased a little bit of it. There's a lot of conversation on social media, on Twitter specifically. A lot of Broncos fans want Denver to trade with the Bears so they can get Justin Fields. Don't think that's going to happen here, but maybe they can get somebody who Justin Fields had a little bit of familiarity with the last couple of seasons, and that is Darnell Mooney. Now, once again, we talk about maybe environment, Sayre. Darnell Mooney's a guy that we saw, okay, hey, this is a guy who can get downfield. He's a deep ball threat for you, but it hasn't really formulated in Chicago consistently enough. Now, last year, Chicago's offense, outside of the time that they played the Denver Broncos and the Washington Commanders, was pretty average, subpar in a lot of different categories here. Darnell Mooney, in my opinion, can be a guy that can maybe rebuild his image. Now, if you look at his overall course of starting in Chicago, he's had a decrease in production and overall efficiency, and it's not all his fault. We talk about the changing of coordinators, talk about changing of coaches, changing of offensive scheme and structure. This stuff impacts you, but you can't ignore the things that Mooney can do well inside of an offense, which I think makes him an intriguing prospect, maybe for Sean Payton, the Broncos, to take a look at.
Very interesting, Cody. And I can't help but wonder, how much does the New Orleans connection play into all of this? Because I think you hear Sean Payton, you talk about a lot of LSU guys they've looked at over the years, and Tulane obviously is right there in New Orleans. So I just can't help but wonder how much familiarity did they have with Darnell Mooney coming out of that NFL draft class where he ran, I think, a 4.37, had a 4.38, something like that, had a 37-inch vertical. So this is a guy who's athletic and explosive and has big time speed, and is somebody who can really be a threat in your offense. Some interesting notes on Darnell Mooney, as he kind of was force-fed a lot of production there in that 2021 season. After a really promising rookie year, the Bears were like, we're getting this guy the ball. 140 targets back in 2021, over 1,000 receiving yards. However, in forcing him the ball, Cody, and this was Justin Fields' rookie season, of course, Darnell Mooney, they had 8 interceptions when throwing the ball his direction. So probably the Bears showed, like, all right, here's what not to do when you're trying to get this guy involved in an offense, because I think they tried to make him such a featured piece, and it ends up being, well, now can we really trust him with a prominent role? So there was a lot of trade rumors over the last couple of years with Darnell Mooney. Does he fit with the Chicago Bears? They bring in the new offensive staff, et cetera, et cetera. The production just goes way, way down, right? The quarterback rating when he was targeted this past season, 57.7, the worst of his career, which all leads me to say, you may think that I'm not on board with this move. You might be able to buy low on a guy like Darnell Mooney and get him in the building on a low risk, potentially high reward contract. Those are the things I'm all about in free agency. And for Broncos fans out there, like, keeping an open mind in free agency, I think, is the biggest possible thing. It's well, how could this guy fit, as opposed to just seeing a name and saying, no, not going to be able to sign that guy, or no, that guy is terrible, he's not any good. I think there's every single one of these guys that we've been talking about, very intriguing names, and Darnell Mooney has a type of speed and explosiveness athletically to be a really interesting fit at every single level of the field.
Well, I think another thing too, it's very rare you see a 5'11" guy be made the number one wide receiver on your offense unless his name is Tyreek Hill, right? And I think maybe they envisioned a Tyreek Hill type of role for Darnell Mooney in 2021, and obviously the big volume of targets speaks to it. But man, it's just like, you knew it. Like, okay, hey, we're going to get more interceptions because this guy has speed. Justin Fields is going to throw it downfield as far as he can to see if he can get to it. That led to a lot of, obviously, turnovers and takeaways there by opposing defenses. For me, I think NFL free agency is a great opportunity. It's a great place for guys, and I think for teams to take chances on players who won't necessarily have the strongest market. Like, will Darnell Mooney have a strong market in this free agency cycle because of his 2021 season where he did see a lot of volumes? Like, what can teams take away from that? Like, when scouts are looking at it and they're looking at tapes and cut-ups of this player, is the issues of that Chicago team relative to something that Darnell Mooney did from his positional standpoint, or is that a byproduct of a bad offense, a young quarterback who's taking too many chances? To me, I'm very curious to see where the evaluation will lie. And obviously, we won't know these conversations unless something happens overall. If Denver does make a move, I just think Mooney is a guy that, hey, like, you're probably not going to have to spend much to be able to get him. I think his market may be a 1 or 2 year deal for some team, an easy out after one, but he's got to face a prove it type of season as well here coming up. He's going to be a 5th-year player. And right now, as the NFL gets younger and younger, Sayre, opportunities for guys like Mooney, they're going to come and go. So now this is the one opportunity you have. Wherever you end up, can you make the most of it? I think that's what intrigues me the most about free agency, wave 2, wave 3, and obviously the developments since the last time we've done a show here. We all know the NFL salary cap is going to be $255 million, so a $30 million increase in that department. Denver has a ton of flexibility to do certain things. We're going to start seeing some moves come in here as well, but Mooney, in my opinion, is an intriguing prospect to keep an eye on.
Do you think, Cody, that an addition like Darnell Mooney or Hollywood Brown or maybe even Laviska Shenault, do you think that kind of move would necessitate a trade of Jerry Jeudy? Let's say they are bringing Courtland Sutton back. We've heard the trade rumors, and it seems like the Broncos are saying, you know what, Courtland Sutton had too good of a year this past year, 2 years left on his deal. This is where teams were offering last year when he still had 3 years left on his deal and was performing well leading up to the deadline. Screw the trade offers. We're taking Sutton off the table. But Jerry Jeudy has around $13 million fully guaranteed this season and would travel with him that $13 million if he was traded. Do you think that any one of these signings would be a thing to say, all right, we're going to trade Jerry, we're going to save the $13 million, and we can recoup, that production another way, like with these guys potentially? Do you think any of these signings would prevent him from potentially coming back?
I feel like the writing would maybe be on the wall, right? And look, nothing against Jerry, but as we know, like, it's all about production. Jerry is at a point where I think we can all admit, I feel like Jerry, at least 2 of his, however long he's been in Denver since he was drafted, I think 2 of his years have kind of been robbed from him. I thought Pat Shurmur robbed him in 2021. I thought Nathaniel Hackett robbed him in 2022 of opportunities to do even more, right? We've seen the talent. We know how great Jerry can be. It just hasn't been in Denver, right? So if Denver goes out and makes a move here for any one of these guys or signs a wide receiver that can do some of the things that Jerry can, I think it is the writing on the wall that, hey, like, he's probably not going to be back here, and maybe not traded now, maybe not like released outright, but he could be traded during the NFL draft. That is something that has been talked about. And obviously, if Denver's looking to keep Courtland, like Mike Kliss reports, and Tim Patrick, how does that bring Jerry back into the mix for this upcoming season? I think it paints a little bit of a bigger picture. And with Marvin Mims, them taking him last year, that was a move that Denver made. Say, hey, like, we're forecasting here. We need to have contingency plans. Adding a wide receiver to the mix that's not part of your room already, I think, to me, is a sign that Denver is looking to move on.
It could very well be, and I tend to agree with you on that. I think that if you're in the mix for these free agents and other names like Mike Kliss mentioned, like names like Tyler Boyd out there and Josh Reynolds and other names like that, I mean, you see a list like that and you think, okay, well, if the Broncos are really in the mix for some of these guys, they could be looking to trade Jerry to the highest bidder, save that $13 million, and recoup with other signings that won't cost you as much on the cap this year. So if they don't have plans to re-sign him beyond this season, like, are you going to franchise tag Jerry Jeudy? I don't know off the top of my head what's the franchise tag at wide receiver this year. It's going to go up next year, so it's going to be substantial, probably somewhere over $20 million at the very least. Are you going to franchise tag Jerry and pay him $13 million this year and the franchise tag next year? Doubtful. Does he look and feel like a long-term player on this roster? That's where, they're going into this evaluation period that hopefully will glean some things from Sean Payton and George Payton at the NFL Combine. I know a lot of people don't expect much from that, but when you talk about players that are currently on the roster, you might actually get something. So hopefully people ask them those questions. I can't wait to find out what this team plans on doing, because reshuffling the deck at wide receiver may be a necessity.
It could be. And look, we're going to get some clarity from George Payton, Sean Payton, maybe this week if they say something interesting to us on Tuesday when they're scheduled to speak to the media, 9 o'clock Mountain Time, 9:15 Mountain Time for George and Sean, respectively. And obviously, you get all your reaction here on the Locked On Broncos podcast. But for all you everydayers out there, tomorrow's episode of the show, here's what you can expect. We all know Sean and George are going to talk. We just talked about the revelation of the $255 million salary cap. What picture does that paint for the Broncos financially, and with some potential restructures and moves coming up? How does it give them a little bit more flexibility to maneuver this offseason? We'll dive deeper into that on tomorrow's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.